Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again. And we're just going to talk now about how this ongoing coronavirus outbreak and the impact it's having just quickly over the movie industry, the impact it's had so far with certain projects and up to date the projects going forward and their postponements and their cancellations going ahead. And just quickly, overall on the industry, we're talking billions of dollars that are being lost with cinemas being closed down, theatre chains globally now being closed down. This was going way back when the first outbreak happened in China, and it was raising issues because, as I've mentioned in previous videos, so many of these blockbusters rely on the international box office, particularly in China, which is every bit as just as big as the US domestic market, maybe even bigger. This is a market that can provide 500 600 million worth of box office to many of these blockbuster films, right? So on the one hand, you're looking at from a merely an industry point of view in terms of jobs, right? Because okay, we go to cinema, we watch the movies, but you have staff on there who sell the food, you know sell the tickets, help with the machines and making all the equipment and running all the films, checking up on all the staffs, the ticket allocations. So just like any other industry, it's going to impact a lot of people and their jobs now, and the fact that they're going to be unemployed for the foreseeable future because there's no indication at all when cinemas we're going to see reopened. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of people, as with many industries, who are now jobless and have to look other places for work. On another scale, as I've mentioned before, there are multiple movies that cost around 150 million to 200 million budget wise, and then you're talking about another 100 million for marketing, right? So all that money has been spent already. We're talking about 200 300 million, right, on production and marketing, but now there's a delay now whether they can see any potential revenue, any potential profit following the closing of all the cinemas, right? So all the money they make from the cinema chains potentially could be denied. There are multiple films that are being pushed back. There are multiple films that are not even going to be released on cinema or have had their cinematic theatrical run cut short, and they've been shifted straight on to streaming. So we're really talking billions in revenue here, potentially being lost on an industry. And a lot of people are very concerned, when is the industry going to turn back? Are we ever going to see return back to some sort of normalcy within the cinema and the theatres, right? Is this going to be the kind of wake up call for people to start really venturing more into online demand and streaming, which I'll talk about in a minute? So if we just quickly go over movies that have been cancelled already. We knew a while back about the James Bond installment, No Time to Die. I did a previous video on that. That had initially been released in April, and that's been moved now to November of this year. That could still happen depending on how much of a grip we get with this virus. That could still be a viable option for release. We know now that the horror sequel, A Quiet Place, which was due to be released shortly, has been delayed also. More notably, the live action adaptation of the Disney animation Mulan, and that was a big kind of debated release because that was due to happen, I think, later on in April, and that was one movie, as I mentioned before, that was going to be heavily reliant on the Chinese box office and international box office territories, right? They would have made a big effort to make sure that they did as much as they could to make as much profit or as much revenue as possible in the Chinese market. So again, there was no surprise to see that being moved. That was a shame because I was really interested. I was very enthusiastic by the trailers for Milan. I thought it looked as really kind of stoic, kind of serious-minded, epic version, of the animation movie. So I was very much looking to that. So that was very unfortunate. So we knew more recently that the Black Widow movie that was scheduled for release on May the 1st, that's now been postponed. They haven't announced when that's going to be kind of re-released. They're talking about maybe July, maybe August, but I'm not sure at the moment. Again, it just you have to reach a point when people feel safe again. So the MCU as a whole may have to do some sort of rejigging in terms of its phase 4 movies. We know that the second MCU movie coming out this year was Eternals, and that was due to come out, I believe, in November of this year. Which, again, just like the James Bond movie, that's still a viable option. But again, when will Black Widow fit into that? I'm not sure. Black Widow is a prequel story, so it could come out really November next year or the year after. It's not going to kind of affect the MCU continuity going forward because it's a prequel, right? So you could kind of release that movie at any point within the next year or two, and it's not going to have a further impact on a direction going forward for phase 4, if you like. There was always a debate, how important was the Black Widow movie, because we know what happens to her in Endgame. But I've been very enthusiastic from the trailers and the footage that I've seen so far. You can check out my reviews. So yeah, I was looking forward to that as well. So we'll have to just keep an eye out to see when that's been postponed to be released. We know also that the Fast and Furious 9 movie, they just pushed that out to the following year. They didn't even bother trying to look for a slot later on this year. And that's one franchise that's been heavily reliant on the Chinese box office. If you go through previous figures for previous installments, they were racking up north of $300 million in the Chinese box office as part of the overall total. Fast and Furious 9, that's a really now $1 billion franchise now, right? So they really can't afford to not have the Chinese box office. The spin-off installment that came last year, Hobbs and Shaw, that made decent amount of box office in the US. I think it was 150 to 180 million in the US, but it was the China box office that kind of saved Hobbs and Shaw, really, and that ended up making north of 750 million worldwide. Ended up being very successful due to the Chinese box office. So there was no way that they were going to try and release this Fast and Furious sequel this year, having no knowledge of when the China theatres are going to kind of be in an active state. So that was no surprise there. And more recently now, literally just yesterday or the day before, it's been announced that Wonder Woman 1984, which was due for release, I believe, in June or July, has now been postponed back to August, right? So again, that's another movie where they've spent a lot already on their budget and marketing. We've had, I believe, 2 trailers, so maybe we were going to get another trailer within the next month or two to promote the movie for its June release, but that's been pushed back now to August. Again, no surprises on there. Maybe they feel August is a good enough time that maybe we can start to see a decline and maybe theatres will start opening again, right? Particularly if China can feel safe enough to open its theatres again, maybe further down the line, US markets and other markets can start opening again. August, I mean, what are we on now? End of March. So that could be a viable option again. If we get to a point with Wonder Woman where we don't, there's been a lot of talk about the streaming service and could it be put on the HBO Max. Now, I don't know why there's been an ongoing debate. People are almost willing for Wonder Woman 1984 to come on streaming, but I'm sorry, for me, that's not going to happen. When you spend 150 to 200 million on these type of movies, right? I've already mentioned the potential revenue and the potential profit that you could gain from these type of movies. There's no way you're going to risk that, losing all of that, right, to have it being put on streaming, right? Wonder Woman, I wouldn't say maybe it's not going to make a billion. I mean, the last movie made 820 million approximately worldwide. So they'd be looking for a similar figure, or maybe even something even more, maybe 888, maybe 900 million, right? It was a very well received sequel. Everybody credited a lot Patty Jenkins' direction, the fact it took such a different tone away from the kind of dark, gritty DC movies that we'd seen previously rather. Everybody likes a lot Gal Gadot's version of Wonder Woman. I think it's a good representation of the character. They liked a lot Chris Pine's Steve Trevor, and as we know from the trailers, he comes back from this sequel as well. So they had a really good chemistry between the two actors in the first movie. So there's a lot of demand for Wonder Woman. Whether you release it this year or next year, people are going to want to watch it in theatres when it comes out, right? So you wouldn't really want to put it on streaming, right? I'll talk a bit about, the streaming aspect in a minute, but for now, I just can't see Wonder Woman not being released in theatres. Too much money's been spent. So another question is about Christopher Nolan's Tenet, which stars Robert Pattinson on there, and that I think is due for a release in July. I've seen no announcement to put that off for now. That I think that's still due to go. But if Wonder Woman is going to shift back to August, I think we're pretty much going to see Christopher Nolan's Tenet be pushed back. Again, I believe the budget for that movie was around 225 million. That's a hefty amount, but Warner Brothers, as we know, has a really strong relationship with Christopher Nolan. He's one of the few directors who can sell a movie really on his name, right? Where the director is kind of bigger than the actors involved. And if you look at all of his movies, as well as the Batman movies, you look at Interstellar and Dunkirk, these are really high big budget movies because they know Christopher Nolan can deliver on the box office on his name alone. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tenet gets pushed back maybe to August, maybe late August, possibly maybe even September release as well. So as far as I know, there's been no updates on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that also got pushed back as well. So those are kind of the current big movie projects that have been postponed and been delayed. We know the future projects, such as the Mission Impossible 7 movie, no title yet, that's been kind of postponed or production, even though I know that Tom Cruise is still filming some scenes kind of on his own in isolation on there. You remember going a few months back, he was filming footage in Italy, and then he quickly moved out of Italy when this coronavirus was really starting to spread out. So that was one future project. We know that the Matrix 4 movie has been postponed. I think they were shooting scenes or production in Germany, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and they were very much in the early production phases there. That's been kind of cancelled now for now. The Matt Reeves reboot, The Batman, which was due to be released in June 2021, has stopped production. I've done previous videos of the footage that was released on the Batsuit with Robert Pattinson in it, and also the Batmobile, and people, were speculating or not because this project's going to feature a lot of Batman's villains in it. So yeah, that's a very high value product that people are looking forward to. Again, that's been shut down and posted. I mean, again, when you talk about these movies, they probably will still come up, but the production just has to be stopped now because of the spread of the virus. Okay, so that was another big name project that's been stopped in the future. So we're going to hear more and more about this as well. Lots of television productions have been stopped as well. So again, this is no surprise. This just factors in with all major sporting events and television events. As each country now is probably well into their second week or third week of lockdown and quarantining. So this is no surprise that we're going to see a lot of these future movie products being postponed. So no issues there. So just lastly now, just to talk about the idea of streaming now, people, I wouldn't say are having a very knee-jerk or paranoid opinion on this, but there's been a lot of debate now with viruses such as this having such a large global scale. Are we going to see an eventual emergence into streaming, right? We've already seen the impact of television, right, which has gone away from cable now when you've got all of these massive streaming apps, Netflix being the primary product, but you've got Amazon and Hulu. So yeah, just to pick up on the streaming aspect, a lot of people are thinking that now movies are going to be transporting over to streaming, and is this the future? Are we going to see cinemas closing down in the up and coming years, and everybody's just going to be watching from home? I wouldn't say that yet, because the reason for that is that you've got a lot of money still to be potentially lost, right? So just say, for example, you have 10 people, right, and you want to watch a movie, and it costs £10-12 to make, right? So 10 people, £12, £120, right, you make, yeah, from going to the cinema, right? If you have 10 people wanting to watch a movie that's on a streaming service, right, all you have to do is say one person shows the movie, they've bought it on the streaming app, and then they can just invite 10 or 9 other people around to watch it, right? So you've lost that potential revenue that you would make from having 10 people going to the cinema and paying to watch it. That's the kind of basic, and I've made a basic example, but that's the kind of potential money, right, that you lose by going from cinema to kind of streaming. And I know the appeal to streaming, as we know, in the comfort of your own home, you don't have to worry about people talking, um, standing up, getting in your way, going on their phones. You can watch it in your 65, 70-inch, 4K, 8K television. You can pause the film whenever you want to. I understand all the benefits of streaming, but you have to understand again that these movies are costing so much money to make, and the potential money to be made from global box office, in theatrical chains, is just too big. It's just too big to then say, no, we're going to release everything on streaming, right? And you got to remember, people who are already subscribing, right, and we're already paying what, $50, $60 a year anyway. So they're gonna presumably get the movie anyway, right? So you're losing that extra change that you're getting from paying that movie, that individual movie, the movie that it would make, right? But also you have to factor in mind that once you put content online, it's kind of like it spreads very much. Well, I don't want to say like a virus, but it spreads so much, right? So then it then becomes open to kind of pirating and torrenting, and people getting on and copying, and they share it around. So a lot of people, right, are going to get these pristine HD versions of the movies for free, right? They're going to torrent it, they're going to pirate it, right? Beforehand, yes, you can. When a movie's released, you generally can get kind of bootleg copies, but the audio's not very good, the picture's not HD quality, so you don't get that same kind of satisfaction, right? So that kind of motivates you to more go to the cinema, right? But once you start putting it on streaming, and once you start, putting it online, and just strictly going on more digital copies, it just really opens up a whole load of problems, right? And how do you safeguard that? How do you protect that? How do you kind of police and stop people from pirating content? They already made a statement, didn't they? The fact that the Mandalorian, if you remember, as part of Disney Plus, that was the kind of premiere show. They anticipated that was going to be one of the pirated shows ever, because the fact that it was only released in America, right, way back last year. Was it September, October last year? It was released, and then it's only started to come out in Europe now. So they basically Disney basically made a statement saying they expected The Mandalorian to be pirated, and we know previously that Game of Thrones used to be the most pirated show, ever amongst popular culture. So then those are television shows, right? But what happens when you start putting these big budget event movies on a digital kind of platform straight away, all pristine HD quality, ready for people to kind of extract and obtain, right? So you just have to be careful when you make those kind of initiatives to say, oh, we're going to start just putting everything on the stream. It's not as simple as that. So I would just think that's other consideration you have to take before you start stating everything go on streaming. So really, that's my overall take on movies and the current state that we're in, and the current issues of streaming. I think it's still going to be a while yet before we see everything go on to that kind of format. There's a lot of considerations that you have to take into place before you start pushing that through forward. But let me know what you think in the comments below about all of these projects being postponed. Do you still think it's premature? Do you still think July, August time is a good time? Or do you think they should be moved later on to next year, which will cause its own headache, because obviously you've got other movies scheduled to come out in the summer for next year, right? So are we going to have a case where we literally have a big budget movie coming up week after week after week after week, right? In general, a movie comes out and then you kind of give it kind of a 2 week breathing space for it to make money on its first and second weekend before the next big movie comes out. But if we kind of pushing all these movies back and they want to save them for next summer, you're really going to have a kind of really condensed and crowded movie space. We've got big budget releases every week. Are people going to be able to afford to watch these movies week on week on week, especially following the financial impacts that this virus is having? So you let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, I'll do these videos as and when I collate the information you know, in a kind of a bulk kind of content, and then I'll release these videos as I can. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Take care of yourselves, keep safe distance, wash your hands, and I will see you guys very, very soon.